Okay, fabulous. I was just giving you a couple of minutes to make sure everyone's connected. It looks like everyone's audio is working now, so I will just get this up and running. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to Learning Environments that Support Grit and Bounce. It's the first session of this year's Imagine If Digital Conference Series. And this year, our conference explores the theme, Imagine If Creativity Gave Us the Freedom to Learn Without Inhibition and to Accept Mistakes as Part of Our Lifelong Discovery. My name's Melba, and I'm Programme Manager for Cultivate Northeast. And for those of you that don't already know us, we're part of Arts Council England's national network of bridge organisations. We connect the education and cultural sectors to enable better access to quality arts and cultural education for all children and young people, no matter their circumstances. And this has really felt more pertinent than ever in our current climate over the last couple of years. I'll be handing over shortly to Mortal Fools, but I've just got a bit of housekeeping to go through first, so please bear with me while I do that. You have received our delegate guidelines in your packs, which arrived before this session. But just to remind you of those, we just ask you to please remain muted unless you're speaking. And if you keep your settings on speaker view, then that means you can see whoever is presenting full screen, which might make things a bit easier for you. If you could take a moment, please, to just edit your Zoom username so that we can see your name and your organisation. That really helps us to know who's who. And if you can add your pronouns as well, that's really helpful for us when we are doing the smaller group breakout sessions and so on. To let you know that we've got our digital stage manager, Danny, with us here today. So if you have any technical issues at all, or you need any help with anything Zoom related, then you can message her via the chat and she'll help you out with anything that you need. And if you have any questions about any of the content as we go along, if you pop those in the chat box, and what we'll do is we'll come back to those at the end. So anything that comes to mind as we go, just pop that in there and we'll come back to it. Just to let you know that we do have subtitles available for this session. So if you want to see the closed captions, you can just click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and then select show subtitle, and that will come up for you during the session there. And to remind you that we are recording today's session, so we did gather consent in the booking forms, but just to let you know, it is being recorded and it will be used as a digital resource on our website after today. Please feel free to share your workshop experience on social media. Our Twitter handle is @CultureBridgeNE, and our conference hashtag for this year is ImagineIf21. So I'll pop those in the chat in a second. And if you are on Twitter and you want to do that, then you can do. And now it's time to introduce today's speakers from Mortal Fools. So we've got Kiz Crosby, who's Artistic Director and CEO, and Scott Wilson, Practitioner and Coordinator. Mortal Fools is a theatre and creative learning company working as co-creators with young people and communities and helping people to connect, have fun, learn and grow. So we're delighted to have them opening this year's Imagine If. And without any further ado, I will hand over to Scott and Kiz. Thank you.
Fab, thanks Mel. Good morning everybody. I hope everybody's Monday has got off to a good start. Really happy to be here with you today. Scott's just going to go through a few more details that just so you've got a good idea of what to expect from today's session. We are going to be taking you through a whole series of activities, some of which is about listening and making notes and so on, and some of which is about gathering your ideas, your input, your insights and sharing those with other people. If you've not yet done so, I really invite you to pop your name, your organisation in the chat as well. So we've got a really good sense of who's in the room as well, do those introductions. And then Scott will just take you through some of those details while you're doing that. Scott.
Thank you, Kiz. So as Mel mentioned, we're going to be using closed captioning throughout the session. So we just encourage you to support that. If you could speak when you are speaking nice and clearly and slowly, that will just help it really translate clearly for those that require the closed captioning. In terms of access to, if there's anything that you need to let us know that would help you and support you throughout the session, please feel free to send a direct message to either myself, Kiz, Mel or Danny, and we'll be more than happy to support you as best we can in today's session. We would encourage you, if you would like to use the gallery view option as well as the speaker view. You can toggle between them throughout the session. We encourage gallery view in the sessions as it allows us to feel part of the group and you can see what everyone else is up to. We normally like to run sessions in person as a big group, so gallery view can help us get as close to that as possible whilst working on Zoom. Whilst we're working on Zoom, we acknowledge that sometimes disruptions happen. And so if at any point during today's session, you need to switch off your camera and go and deal with something, please feel free to do so. And as soon as you're happy to rejoin the session, and just turn your camera back on. We would encourage you to use your camera just so that we can see everybody if you're comfortable to do so throughout today's session. If we also lose signal or you lose signal throughout the session, please just log back on to the same Zoom link that you used to join us this morning. Technical difficulties do happen and hopefully we'll be able to avoid them this morning. But yeah, please join us back on the link that you used this morning. Throughout today's session, we're going to give clear instructions to help you know how to respond to different prompts and take part in the activities. And we'll ask that you give a clear thumbs up or raise a hand if you have a question, or as Kiz and Mel said, you can write those in the chat throughout the session. We encourage a spirit of generous response throughout the session too, and to help with that trust and warmth in today's session. So if at any point anyone says something that you agree with, you can give a thumbs up or a heart or use the reaction buttons. And that just helps people feel like they're not talking into the void of Zoom, and it can build that kind of warmth and trust in today's session. So please feel free to contribute and respond throughout. We will be making notes and sending notes out to you following today's session. You're more than welcome to make your own notes as we go along, but please don't feel that you have to write every single word down as it goes. We'll be distributing the notes from today's session. Likewise, at the end of today's session, we're going to be having time for a Q&A, which you're more than welcome to hang around for and ask any questions you do have. So whilst you're able to put those in the chat, if there's anything that you'd rather ask us in person at the end of the session, just make a note of them, and we'd be more than happy to answer those at the end of today's session. But yeah, we're really excited to be here, and hopefully this will be a very beneficial session for you. And yeah, brilliant. Have I explained that all okay for everyone? Let's try those thumbs up or reactions, as we said. Excellent. Great. Thank you, everybody. I'll hand you back to Kiz.
Great. Thanks, Scott. So as Mel already said, we're from Mortal Fools, and we are a theatre, drama and creative learning company. And we specialise in work with children and young people. And our core purpose is supporting people to have better interpersonal relationships with one another, because it's a fundamental part of human well-being. And we do that through the inherently personal and interpersonal art forms of theatre and drama. Some of our most exciting work is in partnership with schools and youth work settings and health settings, where we work jointly to co-create high-quality theatre-based outputs and bring about measurable social and personal outcomes for everyone involved. So if Mortal Fools' core purpose is to support other people to have really positive interpersonal relationships, everyone who works at Mortal Fools has to be able to do that too. That means having the personal knowledge and the skills to do it. And all of us have to be committed to creating and cultivating an environment at work and in all of our activities which creates the culture that we want. So today's session is creative learning environments that support grit and build bounce. So we're going to use this session to work through the acronym GRIT, considering 4 key areas that we use in our approach to cultivating productive, supportive environments that are healthy at Mortal Fools. So at Mortal Fools, we've done a lot of work on, and will continue to work hard on, cultivating a culture within the organisation that supports everyone to do their work well and to provide the appropriate type of support and inspiration for our beneficiaries. At the beginning of September, we had a company development week, which was 4 days of focused work as a team to consider the building blocks that we needed to cultivate the culture that we want in our organisation. We'll share screen now as a way of walking everybody through what we came up with. So we're going to start here. We spent a lot of time in the development week, considering the comfort zone. All of the images that we share in our presentation will be included in the notes that we send through to everybody, just so that you've got those to refer to. So when we think about the comfort zone, we have to think about our hardwired desire as human beings to remain in situations which are without discomfort. And that provides a day-to-day challenge for creative and innovative working, because creativity, innovation, and learning all have at least elements of discomfort and uncertainty most of the time. So as a team, we worked through this model and considered together what is needed at each stage to support development and growth. So we'll start with a quick run through of the 4 different things that we identified, which are some of the key things, and then we'll look at them again in some more detail. So the first point was fostering a growth mindset in ourselves and others. Growth mindset, briefly, is the belief that our abilities are not fixed and can be developed. The second key point was cultivating a practice of responsibility. There are many component parts to this one. It's probably the most complicated and complex of all of the things we considered. So today we're going to focus on the ability to respond with resilience and being accountable for our own bounce back from difficult situations. The third key point is inclusion. Working in ways that enable people to participate fully, to feel safe and heard, and not to come to harm through the work. We're going to look at a psychological model to help with healthy and productive interactions a little bit later in the session that will support with that. And the final component of our 4 parts is trust. Trust is a fundamental need in our workplaces and in all our learning and creative spaces. And we're going to touch on 3 things that have not gone to plan at Mortal Falls in the last year and how we handled them, and critically, how the team grouped together and supported one another when things were not going well. So now we'll go back to look at each of these in a bit more detail. So we'll go back to growth mindset. So cultivating a growth mindset is an important consideration as we prepare ourselves for stepping out of our comfort zones. It was a term originally termed by Carol Dweck, and her research was focused on how mindset affects how children learn and achieve in schools, and how children themselves and the teachers around them can influence this. So let's now have a quick look at the key differences between growth and fixed mindset. So with a fixed mindset, we'll start there. And that is the belief that we're either good at something or we're not. When we're frustrated, we often give up. We're quite resistant to challenge and don't like challenge. We'll actively work against that. When we fail, we tell ourselves that it's because we're no good as opposed to the thing didn't go well. Where you cultivate a fixed mindset, when you tell people that they are smart, that is a fixed view of them. And it ends up inadvertently cultivating that fixed mindset, that fixed self-view. If someone else succeeds, so if you succeed, I feel threatened if I've got a fixed mindset. And my abilities determine everything. And then if we look at a growth mindset in contrast to that, I can learn anything I want to. When I'm frustrated, I persevere, I don't give up. I want to challenge myself because I want to grow, because I thrive off that challenge, and because I have a good perspective of knowing that that challenge and the discomfort that comes with that won't last forever. It'll get to a point where actually I get satisfaction from what comes from it. When I fail, I learn. To help cultivate a growth mindset, tell me I try hard. Now it's a really important point to note that has to be real praise. You can't tell somebody that they've worked really, really hard when actually they haven't. But if it's truthful and we praise the effort that goes into it and we praise the perseverance that goes into that and working through challenge, you can help cultivate the growth mindset in someone. If you succeed, if I've got a growth mindset, I'm inspired by that. I might look up to that. I might use it as an opportunity to think about how I could do things differently. And my effort and my attitude determine everything. Now, it's important to note that it's unlikely that we have a fixed or a growth mindset in every setting. We all have the capability to sit in both and to move in both. But actually, like with all learning, the bit that you feed the most is the bit that then grows, is the bit that then is in the driver's seat. So we need to make sure that we're cultivating the growth mindset, way of thinking and way of doing things the majority of the time, and recognizing the fixed mindset, and particularly when it happens, so that we can check ourselves and do something different. And if we're thinking about people who lead learning environments, how we facilitate those sessions and how we are speaking to those, particularly children and young people that we're working with, is absolutely critical in that. So let's go on to what methods we can use to cultivate a growth mindset in ourselves and those we're working with. For us, we've thought about our colleagues and also children and young people specifically. So one way Carol Dweck defines as cultivating that practice of growth mindset is integrating reflection into our day-to-day work. So Scott's now going to lead us all through a simple game that we use in both digital and in-person spaces, which is a really useful reflection tool. It's a bit playful and it's a good tool to get us all reflecting. So, Scott.
Lovely. So this task is a task we call Anyone Who. And this is just a simple way of connecting through similarities, but also acknowledging differences and what makes us unique as we work in a workplace. So to do Anyone Who via Zoom, what I need is your thumb, if you have your camera on, and I will just explain the slight variation if you don't have your camera on. But firstly, the camera on, you would pop your thumb over the camera like so. So if everyone gives that a try, if you're able to. If you're part of a group of people on Zoom, you'll have to nominate a thumb cover. So what will happen is everyone will start with their thumb over the camera. I'll then give you a statement. If that statement is true to you, you uncover the camera and we see your face. If it is false, you keep your thumb over the camera and remain out of that prompt. If you're not using your camera today, you can use the thumbs up reaction like so. If it applies to you. If it doesn't, just don't react. That's absolutely fine. So what we're looking for here is those moments of similarity, the things that connect us and the things that make us the same. So let's try our first one. So if everyone could cover their camera for me, I'm going to keep my camera uncovered just while I facilitate this, just so that you can see me speaking as I go. Brilliant. So if everyone covers their camera, let's go for the first one. Anyone who has ever felt vulnerable at work. So if that's true, you uncover yourself or give a thumbs up. Okay, great. Let's cover that back up. Anyone who has felt accomplished at work. Great, thank you. Let's cover that back up now. Anyone who likes to feel challenged. Very good to know as we go forward in the session. Lovely, let's cover that one back up, thank you. Anyone who has ever worried about failing. Yeah, I would certainly be with you on that one. Yeah, okay, let's cover the camera back up again. Anyone who believes that achievement should be rewarded. Nice, thank you very much. Let's cover them up. Anyone who sometimes procrastinates to avoid doing something challenging. Thank you for your honesty. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, let's cover them back up. Anyone who sometimes feels threatened by the success of other people that they work with or know. Thank you. Lovely. Let's cover them back up. Anyone who has given up on something because it got too hard? Nice. Some very resilient people in the group. Nice. Okay, let's cover the camera back up. Thank you for those that uncovered as well. Anyone who believes that you're either good at something or you're not? Nice. Thank you. Lovely. Cover the camera back up. Anyone who sometimes just says nothing for fear of saying the wrong thing or looking stupid? Yeah. Thank you. Lovely. Let's just do a couple more. Just cover the camera up. Anyone who, when something goes wrong, usually blames themselves rather than others? Nice. Thank you. Let's cover back up. So anyone who knows how to bounce back when things do go wrong? Nice, interesting. Lovely, yeah. And the last one, let's cover up. Anyone who has someone around them or people around them who support them to bounce back? Nice. Okay. Lovely, thank you. Everyone, you can uncover your camera if you have them covered. And yeah, thank you for taking part in that. That was some really honest feedback there as well. And yeah, thank you for taking part so actively there. What I want you to do is just to give you a couple of minutes to consider and maybe make some notes of reflection for yourself. What I want you to think about is the prompt, how can I cultivate more growth mindset in my setting? So there's some different things there, different reflections coming from people about the whether you can factor in what's right and what's wrong, or whether you should reward achievement and things like that. And also that element of support around you, that support of growth mindset in your setting. So I want you to just have a couple of minutes just to think about that. And what we're going to do in a moment is to write those in the chat and then send them. I'd like to ask you not to send them until I prompt you to, just so that we all send them at once. But yeah, if you want to write your response in the chat, we'll just give you a couple of minutes now to write that up. And then when I prompt you, we'll send them all together. Have I explained that okay for everybody? Lovely, thank you for the nods, yeah. Okay, so just again, how can I cultivate more growth mindset in my setting? Okay, can I get a thumbs up from everybody just to get a gauge of whether you're ready to send? If you're not, take your time, don't worry. Lovely, we'll give a couple more minutes, that's fine. Okay, great. Can I just check in again, like a thumbs up if you are ready now? Thanks, Alice. Thanks, Katie. Thank you, David. Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Sarah and Sarah. Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Solana. Sarah, was that a question? There we go. Okay, everyone, if we'd all like to hit send, and I'll just give you a minute just to have a read through what everyone else has written and see if there's any connection again, any similarities there. So we've got different prompts here about allowing time to reflect and not singling participants or delegates out. Praising effort over outcomes as well. Thank you, David. Nice from Katie there, speaking up when ideas aren't fully formed and needing support. There's some really great reflections there in the chat. Thank you for those. Just so that you're aware, we are able to save the chat and they'll become part of the notes. So if anyone's trying to scribble down what someone said, they will be part of the notes that we'll send out after today's session. Brilliant. Okay, excellent. What I'm going to do, I'm going to hand back now to Kiz, and we're going to continue looking at our slides. So Kiz.
Thanks, Scott. And thank you, everybody, for those ideas. I'm busily whizzing through them myself and going, oh, that's a great way of putting that. Oh, I like that. Thank you. Oh, that's a form of words that captures something that I've maybe not quite been able to capture clearly. So that's excellent. Thanks, everybody, so much. I think what we can definitely see from the things that people have put there is that there's not one way. There's not one way to cultivate the growth mindset. So that's where thinking about your particular setting is really important. But also, I would really encourage you to think in practical terms, action-based terms. So what maybe 3 small things can I think of that actually I'm going to really focus on? So that might be, I'm going to focus on giving praise, for example, structured praise, formative feedback. And I'm going to, if that's something that I don't feel like I do as an automatic or as a regular feature, that I will consciously cultivate that as part of a development of my practice over a period of time. Because if we end up with a list of 10 things, for example, here are all the things that I could do to cultivate growth mindset, you'll end up not doing any of them. So pick the things, a few things, and consciously work to integrate those. And possibly, if you can, let other people know that you're going to do that as well, so that they can look out for it and they can support you in doing that, and so on. And that's how we end up doing those, integrating something into practice that then sticks. As a little sideline, and a lot of you will probably know this already, but one of the things that we've got really interested in is neuroscience and neurology and how these things all intersect. To learn something, to really lay a new neural pathway so that it becomes solid, takes about 400 repetitions. So please keep that in context. If you try something 10 times and it hasn't quite stuck yet, there is nothing wrong with you. That is just how neuroplasticity works. That's how we lay those neural pathways. So stick with it, help get other people to support you in doing that, and then have other people do likewise. So things for them that they want to integrate. So great. If we can share the screen again, Scott, please. And we'll move on to the next part in our GRIT series, which is responsibility. So as I said before, there are many components to this part of our organizational culture. But principally, responsibility is our ability to respond well, both in the moment when something occurs and also in what we do afterwards. So how we identify and integrate the learning from what has occurred. So for today, we're going to focus on resilience and the ability to bounce back from adversity. And we can't talk about I can't even say that word today, adversity, without talking about fear. So fear is our shortcut for what gets in the way of growth and achievement. It's the space that we find ourselves in when we first step out of that comfort zone. And fear triggers can have a profound effect on our mind, our bodies, and our behaviours. So let's spend a couple of minutes just considering how fear affects us. So our fear response is part of our nervous system, more commonly referred to as fight or flight. So when we experience something that stresses us out, there are dozens of things that happen rapidly in our bodies. These include a release of glucose to provide a burst of energy. You might notice yourself if you're feeling a bit stressed, reaching for the biscuits, for example, or the sweets. This is your body releasing glucose and then burning it through these processes and needing that replenishment. We're also flooded with two hormones. One is adrenaline, and adrenaline is the energizing hormone, and it's designed to activate our muscles to either fight whatever that danger is or to run away from it. And again, adrenaline has a profound effect on the body, raises the heart rate, can make us sweat, affects loads of other systems, and shuts down certain systems in the body as well. The second hormone that is released is cortisol. And this is a suppressant hormone. And amongst other things, it suppresses our digestion and our immune system. So when we're stressed out, we might be a little bit more likely to get ill, for example, so to pick up colds and to constantly be getting those things. And then you might find that you get kind of belly problems. And sometimes the cortisol in our bodies can manifest in skin breakouts and all sorts of different things. But these hormones are designed to have a sort of quick fire effect to get our bodies in the state to either fight this danger or to run away. And they're not designed to be in the body as a kind of constant, which is when we're feeling stressed out, that's what happens, that we're constantly getting those triggers. And it's really, really not good for our bodies. And one of the consequences of all of this is that our blood pressure rises as well. So this is a highly efficient and effective system, but it's also out of date. The fight or flight response in our bodies is controlled by the part of our brains known as the limbic system, specifically the amygdala, which sits right at the center of our brain. And the trouble is that the limbic system is a non-thinking part of our brain. So it's designed to act on instinct and override all other systems when it's triggered. In the time of our ancient ancestors, stress was largely limited to things that were an actual threat to our lives, like being hunted by tigers. And the problem is that the limbic system has not yet evolved to be able to distinguish between an actual threat to our lives and other stressors that trigger the same responses. So we might associate the fear response with something like this poor spaniel is experiencing, but in reality, it's more likely to look like this. Our modern lives are full of things which trigger the limbic system, perhaps never more so than at the moment. So let's consider a few things that might trigger this system in a learning environment. The fear of getting it wrong, constantly changing friendships, being laughed at, comparison with others, being shamed in front of the group in some way. The common factor in all of these triggers is a fear of being isolated from the safety of the group in some way. Human beings are designed to live our lives in secure groups because it's a safer environment from external threats. If we create environments where individuals feel on the outside of the group in some way, even if they simply feel like they might just be pushed out with the wrong answer or something they and others perceive as failures, these automatic fear systems are triggered in their brains. And if it's an automatic trigger, you can't just tell somebody to stop being scared and they will. In actual fact, Another effect of the stress hormone cortisol is to impede the function of our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for rational thought. The system doesn't want us standing around debating how close the danger is and whether in fact it's a danger. If there's a tiger there, it wants us to simply get away from it as fast as possible. As a side note, many people at this stage of the pandemic are reporting reduced brain functioning. I am definitely noticing that in my work. Things that previously would have been easy feel arduous and more complicated, and I'm finding it harder to get to a point of clarity on things. That, amongst other things like widespread fatigue, is a symptom of the brain's long-term and continuing exposure to cortisol, and definitely one to bear in mind in our learning environments. So if we simply can't turn these systems off, we need to limit the ways our learning and creative environments are inadvertently triggering fear responses, alongside developing a regular practice of using physical and action-based approaches to manage that fear. So in Mortal Fools, we've embedded a number of things in our practice to regularly support this. A few of those are, we've created a team shit list. That is things that really help us when we're feeling shit. And we've identified 3 things each that really help each of us and created a combined list. We've also created a list of things, like one thing especially that really doesn't help us. And that we can then use those to remind each other in those moments when you just get embedded in the feeling of being stressed. We can then maybe remind one another of those things that help. So for me, I really like big open spaces. I like a kind of a view, because it helps me get perspective back when I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. It makes me feel small in a kind of big vista, and that really helps me recalibrate. The one thing that I really struggle with if I'm feeling stressed out is being told what to do. It really pushes all the wrong buttons. And it's a useful thing for other people in the team to know that, so that they don't start doing that, trying to be helpful, but it doesn't really help. Another thing that we've done is we've created a shorthand for dealing with difficult conversations. And one of the things that we're using is timeout. So when someone says that they need a timeout in our team discussions, we all understand that that means that they're having the feelings like emotions or confusion is rising in them, and they're now struggling to stay in the conversation and to focus. And so bear in mind what we said about those stress hormones rising. The prefrontal cortex stops functioning as well, so they are less able to actually be part of the conversation. So it's a more efficient way for us to say, hang on, I really need a time out here, to not have to explain what's going on because everybody shares the shorthand, and they can then step away from the Zoom meeting or the real life meeting, whatever it is, and spend a few moments walking about, getting those stress hormones down and recalibrating to work out what it is that is stressing them out, so that they can come back to the conversation productive, clear, and able to mention what that is, so that we can then work through it and we can address it. And it's become such a helpful way of working through difficult, challenging conversations where emotions are high. And especially at the moment, because there's so much change in the world and everybody's had to do so much adapting, to find really good strategies to work through those that everybody shares and everyone buys into has been absolutely fundamental for us. To back that up, we also use forms of words in conversations that encourage curiosity and openness. One of our favourites is Brené Brown's rumble language. If you've not come across Brené Brown before, Google rumble language. The form of words is very American. So we find some other words that maybe the language sits slightly better with us. Alice, your comment in the chat about that requires a lot of trust. Yes, it does. And guess what's going to be T in our grit series? We've got there, right? These things have to sit together. They have to sit together, but they have to all be cultivated as a team. Because if I was the only person doing that in my team, for example, that makes me hugely vulnerable. That's where cultivating the culture that is clear, that is explicit, that is that everybody buys into is so important. So that then when we deviate from that, we've got a thing to bring everybody back to. And that's been really, really important. We've done lots more work on culture and writing this stuff up. So if there's a conversation you want to pick up outside of this session, and this goes for anybody, we'll give our email addresses, and really, really happy to share whatever we've got. And then, as many of you will already do in your sessions, so whether this is in the classroom, whether this is running drama sessions or whatever, we also use practical activities that just help everybody manage whatever the energy is. So you'll know this with children and young people, you know, if the energy starts to elevate and it's all getting a little bit bonkers, then we need to do something to recalibrate that. So that might be a breathing exercise, that might be stretching, that might be some mindfulness, whatever that is. And actually, as grown-ups, in our workplaces, as well as in our work with those children and young people, we need to be doing the same things for us, because we cannot do that for them if we're not doing it for us. If our stress levels and our hormones are up here, then actually we'll be giving out that to everybody around us. So that self-management has to come first. Okay, so we're now going to give everybody 2 minutes to consider practical ways that you can support with resilience and cultivating this culture of resilience in your settings. So I'm going to, again, re-emphasize the practical and the action-based. And I'd like you to think about some tangible things. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes just for yourself to make some notes. And then we're going to pop you into small groups in breakout rooms where we're going to invite you to share some of those things with the colleagues that you're in that setting with. And then when you come back as small groups, we're going to give each group 1 minute, and we're going to be very strict on this, to share back one tangible idea with the rest of the group. So here's something that we discussed that we all thought, actually, this is a really great idea and we want to share it with the group. Have I explained that clearly as a task? Please give me thumbs up. Great, thanks, Mel. You're the only person I could see on my screen then, so that was really helpful. So 2 minutes thinking, and then we'll pop you into those breakout groups. Great, okay. Thanks, Danny, for muting my typing. That wasn't very good Zoom etiquette of me, was it? Are we ready with the breakout rooms? Fab. Okay, so everybody, you'll have a pop-up that will invite you to join a breakout room. You need to click to accept that probably, and then we're going to give you 7 minutes. So we'll send you a little note to your breakout rooms to give you a 1 minute warning. Okay, we do that now? Do you want to pause the recording here, or do you want to just edit it out afterwards? Great. I think that is everybody back. Thank you so much. I hope you had productive conversations. One thing I realised that I did not do ahead of you going into breakout rooms was to ask you to elect a spokesperson from your group who could feed back on behalf of the group. So now what I'm going to ask you to do is to be very bold, and if you are happy to speak as a spokesperson on behalf of your group, could you please use the raise hand function so that we can see who we're going to come to. And we'll come to each group in turn, or you can just use your actual hand. I know that's, thank you, David. And so David, Katie, is Jill, Alice? No, not Jill. Somebody else has opted for Jill. Okay. We're going to give you a minute to hear back from those from each group. We'll come around in a second and make sure we've heard from each group. We'll give you 1 minute. We're going to be strict so that we make sure we keep time and hear everybody's idea, but we're looking for that tangible idea. So Alice, could we come to you first, please?
Yeah, so we were all primary teachers, and we wanted to think of a way that we could do all of this and build it into our practice and normalise this, so it didn't feel like something funny or something, you know, that would agitate the children. We all did sort of movement and jumping when things were getting a bit edgy in the classroom to sort of expend energy, but we all felt like that the idea of bringing things down was a really something we didn't do. And so doing yoga, breathing, something like that, and normalise it in our practice so that, you know, it was a time to just take stock and take yourself back to a secure place if you're feeling anxious, would be something that we could all work on to make our classrooms less threatening. You know, if people, and if we were all doing it at the same time, then, you know, those feelings would be acknowledged within the group. Everybody can feel like this, everybody can feel anxious sometimes, and it was a recognised way of bringing us back down and giving everybody time out. Yeah, so that was our thought.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. And I think if I can just add to that briefly, one thing that's really worth recognising that links to that is, you remember before I said that we're social creatures, human beings, we're designed to live in groups. So what that means is that we're highly attuned to the signals that we're getting from other people, subconsciously attuned. So you'll know this, all of you, from being in work environments. What's it like? You could come in and you'll be in a lovely mood. You've had a great journey there. You're feeling really good. And you're around someone who's really stressed out. What is the impact on us? And it doesn't matter how much we tell ourselves, we can't do that. We can't, like, we don't, I'm not stressed, I'm fine. Because our bodies are that subconscious part of our brain, the limbic system, is picking up on those danger signals from somebody else. even if consciously our brains are telling us that's got nothing to do with me, there's no reason for me to feel stressed out about that, our subconscious brains are picking up on those signals all the time. In a classroom, you can see how then, even just with a few children who are experiencing those things and giving out those signals, you'll all know this, you get that ripple effect, don't you, amongst a group. And the same is true in our colleague teams as well. It's exactly the same, which is where these things actually, what I really like about what you said, Alice, is about normalizing working on this, because these are the realities of how our brains work and how we're triggered. So let's start talking about them more and normalize, including doing something about them to manage them day to day. Really nice. Who was feeding back on behalf of another group? Please give me a wave. Katie, please, we'll come to you next, and then we'll come to David.
Hello everybody, thank you for a lovely morning so far, everybody together. We had lots of ideas in our group, but we tried to summarise just 3 of them because there was 3 of us in our group. We talked about sharing examples of failure, making those explicit and celebrating the learning from those so that it's obvious and not hidden away. We talked about having a kind of open door, listening to ideas, encouraging people to feel valued and see their kind of role in the bigger picture and the effect that that has for the whole objective, which we were talking about children and young people in that example. And we talked a little bit about creating a coaching culture where open questions are encouraged. So we're challenging the idea and not the person. And that enables kind of conversations to be curious and not to be shut down. And all of that was really rooted into the vision and values and reminding us all in our conversations of what the end goal really is, so that we keep a hold of that in the middle of the picture. I hope that's a summary that was reflective of our conversation, Team 3.
Oh, look at that. And gold star for you for hitting bang on a minute, Katie. That's quite incredible. Well done. Yeah, lovely. Really great reflections. Again, we'll capture all of these from the recording, and all of these things will be included in the notes as well, so that you don't have to busily try and get everything down. Please don't feel anxious about the fact that you're not. We'll get it for you. David, let's come to you.
Yeah, so we talked about the importance of the kind of the start of a session, the sort of welcome experience, regardless of whether that's from reception up to teenagers, up to adults. Importance of kind of meeting and greeting people in a positive way, being inclusive and welcoming them to the session, but also preparing participants in a session so that they know what's coming, taking some of the uncertainty out of things, which can sometimes lead to anxiety, and just including clear expectations so everyone kind of knows what's going to happen, and they're not worrying about unknowns as they come into the session. I think that was about it.
That's a really, really strong summary as well, and things that we can apply in really practical ways, as we've said today, which is excellent. Fab, thank you. So we had Hortz, Catherine and Solana that were in the last group. Who was feeding back on behalf of that group? Hortz, hooray.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I don't think Catherine didn't participate. I think was just listening. So we talked about, firstly, about thinking about growth mindset and embedding it into the everyday and into the culture of the organisation through the small things. It doesn't have to be, the big things that go in there. And we thought potentially about doing that through, structural and practical activities and changing the culture a little bit. So thinking about, practical prompts, a buddy system like mentoring, which is around sharing learning, sharing experience, sharing stories of failure, like just really getting it into the everyday so that we're talking about mistakes and learning and all of that. And also to talk and to think about reflection and really strategically and making sure that it's embedded into projects, because it often is the thing that people don't have time for because they're on for the next thing to make it happen. But, really being strict about it, that at the end of the project we're reflecting and just changing some of the language. So I talked a little bit about, evaluation periods at the end of a project or thing tends to be a binary, what went well, what didn't go well, as if it's good and bad. and actually reframing the language more around what did we learn, and encouraging that, safe space to share, the learning from things that went well and the learning from things that didn't go so well. And that was us.
That's great, lovely. Thank you so much, everybody. There's a real richness of ideas and thinking there that I'm looking forward to looking through when we pull the notes together as well, and stealing all your ideas. So thanks for that. Okay, so we're going to share the screen again, and we're going to move on to the third part in our GRIT acronym, which is inclusion. So inclusion is layered throughout our work, and it requires a consistent effort and learning for us to do well. Because our work focuses on co-creation, cultivating environments where everyone feels enabled to participate fully in what we're creating together is of fundamental importance, and especially for those who face multiple barriers to participation. There are multiple ways to boost inclusion in our learning settings, but today we're going to keep the focus on practical behaviour and share one of the key psychological models that we use at Mortal Fools in how we work together as a team and how we cultivate learning environments where everyone feels empowered. It's called transactional analysis, or the parent-adult-child model. I'm going to walk us through it now. I'm aware this is quite a lot of brain food for a Monday morning, so everybody's doing really, really well. And bear in mind, all of this will be written up in the notes as well. And we'll also put signposts to other TED Talks and little videos and stuff that really can help enhance and embed this learning. So the transactional analysis model says that each person has 3 ego states: the parent, the adult, and the child ego. We're only ever in one ego state at a time, but we move in and out of the 3 of them in response to the things we experience moment to moment. Every interaction between 2 people is a transaction between one of these ego states in one person and another ego state in another person. For example, parent ego state in one person interacts with the child ego state in another. I've used this model in my work as a theatre director to work with actors to consider different dynamics that exist between characters and how these evolve over the course of the play. So let's look at the parent ego state. Our parent ego state is formed from behaviours that we each learned from our parents and other significant adults in our lives in our early childhood. There are 2 parts to this ego state: the nurturing parent, that part of ourselves that helps us to self-soothe and to provide care and soothing for other people, and the critical parent that tells us and others what to do with a strong emphasis on right and wrong and sets our expectations of ourselves and others. And then we have the child ego state. The child ego state is the center of our emotions. And again, it's formed from our emotional experiences in early childhood. Like the parent ego state, it's made up of 2 parts: the adaptive child, which uses learned emotional behaviors to get what it wants, and the free child, which is spontaneous, creative, emotive, and present in the moment. The parent and child ego states are almost fully formed by the time we're about 7 years old. It is almost impossible to significantly change the parent and child ego states as grown-ups. However, we can learn to recognize our behaviors and our tendencies from those ego states and learn to manage them in ways that are helpful to ourselves and to other people, which is especially important in facilitation, teaching, and in leadership positions. So we manage the parent and child behaviors using the adult ego state. The adult ego state is the part of us that can think rationally and logically about the situation that we're in. It's the planner, the observer, the organizer, and the analyzer in our personality. And it processes the information it receives directly from the other ego states and what it receives itself, and decides how to act accordingly. The adult ego state is present in our psychology as soon as an infant begins to have an awareness of themselves as a separate entity from other people. So it's around 10 months old usually. The adult ego state is where we learn. It's the only ego state that is capable of growth and development throughout our lives. And psychological maturity comes as the adult ego state grows and is in the driving seat of our behaviours much more often than the child or the parent ego states. So the transactional analysis model includes the term complementary transactions. That means ego states which are natural triggers for other ego states. The most complementary triggers are parent to child and child to parent. It's not that these triggers and these interactions are bad per se, but they can result in patterns of behaviour which can become unhelpful. In the notes from the session, you'll receive a reflective exercise where you can consider each of these ego states and how you see them active in yourself and how that might be impacting on the dynamic you feed into learning environments and into work in general. And so to get you started thinking about that, I'm just going to share a few reflections about me. So this grid that we've now got in front of you are the typical examples of behaviours that we see within each ego state. So I'm just going to work us through that very briefly to give you a good understanding of how those things play out in dynamics with other people. Now, if we start with the first two columns, the critical parent and the nurturing parent, I don't have very many behaviours that I recognise in myself in the critical parent. Occasionally, I would say forceful and maybe dominating and sometimes demanding. I would say those come out for me. But I have a lot in the nurturing parent. That's a very, very strong part of my personality. And I imagine, given what most people in this room do for a living, you would have a lot of nurturing parent in there as well. I might be wrong, but that would be my guess. Because I have those strong, the strong emphasis for the nurturing parent in my work and in my work with colleagues, but also in my work with children and young people, I have a real tendency to want to look after people, and sometimes that can manifest as almost wanting to not do it for them, but sort of hold people a little bit more safely. Whereas actually what I need to be doing is helping people step out on themselves and become more autonomous. Because what happens is if people are receiving a nurturing parent ego state from me, I'm more likely to then trigger a child response in them because they're complementary transactions. So what I might get if I'm being helpful, if I'm looking after people, if I'm being sympathetic and understanding and all of those things that are not bad qualities, there's a danger that if I look at the adaptive child column on the right, people might become dependent. And if that becomes a pattern, that's not a great environment because it means that individual can't do the thing without me. And what sometimes then happens is you end up getting a flip where either I end up flipping into a critical parent where I suddenly become really frustrated with that person and why can't you do that yourselves? That's your job. Or I've been trying to do this for you for so long, you need to do that by yourself now. Or flip from the other person where they might flip and go, you're always telling me what to do. You're micromanaging me, or I can do it by myself, and all of those sorts of things. And that's where those dynamics become really problematic. So instead, what we need to do is if we get somebody expressing what is the emotional need that comes from their child personality, the child ego state, that it's met with the parent and hopefully the nurturing parent. So if someone's really struggling with something, then let's be affectionate. I want to be considerate. I want to look after them and be understanding. But then my job is to help them move into the adult ego state where we can start to problem solve, where we can put into practice some of those things that are in that center column about being logical. Let's be methodical and organized. Let's be rational. Let's think things through and plan how we can take that action. So let's think about that specifically in work with children and young people. there is a danger here that if we are consistently, as the grown-ups in the room, in that parent ego state, we are triggering the child ego state in those children. And we are then propagating those dynamics. What we need to do instead is start to move more into the adult ego state, so that then the children meet us in their adult ego state, which, remember, is a much early formation stage than ours, but is still present, and help them grow that part of their psychology by learning to problem solve, by learning to think rationally, by learning to take the information and the feelings that they're experiencing and what they believe to be right and wrong and all of those things, and process it and have more self-control over their actions, so that they're not being controlled by their emotions all of the time. In the workplace, you can see how this would play out as well in dynamics between colleagues. So in a leadership position, it's not helpful for me to be in a parent ego state most of the time. If a colleague comes to me and they're really struggling, and that they are in that place where they're feeling really nervous, when they're feeling anxious about things, then I can meet it with the parent ego state. I can be warm, I can be sympathetic, I can be affectionate, but the process needs to be the same. But then I move us back into the adult ego state to have a rational conversation about it and to plan action. And you can see how you might go back and forth multiple times between these ego states, even just in the course of one conversation. But the point is, we're trying to pull people back into being in that adult ego space as much as possible, because then we are much more in control, we're much more rational, and we're able to move forward, we're able to make progress. I'll talk about a couple of non-complementary transactions, but the worst one is parent-parent. So if the parent ego state is the seat of what we believe to be right and wrong, if you're looking at something, you might be looking at the same thing from different perspectives, and both of you believe that you're right. And probably both of you are right and both of you are wrong. The point is, we need to then get into that adult ego state to go, okay, I can see that we're looking at the same thing differently. I'd like to understand more about this from your perspective. That is an adult ego state, statement, question, comment. That's where things like the Brené Brown rumble language is really helpful, because it gives us a form of words to get into those kind of conversations. Otherwise, we just end up in a place of conflict. The child ego state, obviously the free child is such an important part of learning, of creativity, of innovation. And we have to be in that space without inhibitions in order to create. That's such an important space. So as grown-ups, we have to get really, really comfortable with our child ego state, with our free child ego state, in order to get into that space. Same true for learning environments as it is for creative environments. But then what we have to do is take what we're discovering in that free child space and apply it by processing it and analyzing it in our adult ego state. And that's how we start to embed the learning. That's how we start to create something that then becomes tangible. You have to have the combination of those different ego states in order to move forward. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of people in our free child state having a brilliant time and getting nowhere. You can see the child state as well. If I think about this in a work context, we have a really good example where, so say you're working on something really difficult, right? And you're getting in that stuck bit that we talked about before. One of us might go, should we just sack this off and go to the pub? That's your free child ego state. And one of us might then go, oh God, yeah, that would be so good, wouldn't it? The free child joins the free child. Nothing wrong with that. But if we then do sack it off and go to the pub on more than one occasion, you can see how that quickly becomes problematic, right? Equally, so the child joins the child. Another thing that might happen in that moment is it might be, no, we really have to get this done. And then actually what you might see is the person who is in the free child go into their adaptive child and get moody, get inhibited, get grumpy about it because they feel stupid because they've had someone come at them in their parent ego state. Whereas actually the craft here in the behavior terms is to be able to go, do you know what? I would really love to be able to go to the pub, but we have this work that we really need to do. So maybe we find a way of doing that and then we go to the pub afterwards. And you can see how you're bouncing back and forth between the different ego states, but without getting stuck in a behavioral dynamic that becomes problematic. So I'll put all of this in the notes and I'll give you a reflective task for you to work through so that you can consider that. But again, in terms of making things visible and talking about these things, this has become something that in our staff team, we found hugely useful as a lens through which to analyse behaviour in a non-judgmental, non-critical fashion. Because if this is everybody's psychological makeup, it's a lens that can be applied universally, and we can just use it to analyse the dynamics that removes us a bit from the situation and allows us to plan how to be productive in those things. We found that hugely useful, and I hope you do as well. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our final part in our GRIT acronym. And the final part, as Alice already highlighted before, is trust. Trust for us means having one another's backs by all contributing to the culture that we want in our organisation, and fundamentally gathering around one another when things don't go to plan. As part of the company development week that I mentioned at the beginning of our session, we considered the emotions and the feelings that we will not accept at work. And this is what we came up with. We're using the information that we gathered and that was present on this slide to inform the development of our safer and supported spaces policy. If creativity requires discomfort, as we've said, if learning requires discomfort, we can't expect everyone to feel rosy all of the time. It's unrealistic. But this slide shows what, as a group, we won't ever accept. And then there's the emotions that we will accept at work. We want this to translate into all of our activities and all of our learning environments. This again there's a lot on this screen, as I'm aware, but this then gives us that benchmark. Here's what we're aspiring to. Here's what it should feel like to be in our spaces, to be in our workplace, to be in all of the sessions that we run. And if we're not doing that, and if someone's experience is different to that, we have to investigate that and learn and do something different. So a fundamental part of building a trusting culture is how we behave when we fail. Do we discharge those uncomfortable feelings by blaming, for instance? Or do we use them as opportunities for learning and growth? And so many of you reflected on that from your breakout space conversations already. So as an organisation, I want to move us away from the word failure. It's not helpful, and it's often hugely charged, meaning that when we talk about failures, we actually think about catastrophe. If we're practiced in dealing with the little things that don't go to plan, or the challenges that present themselves to us with more regularity, we'll fare better when and if catastrophe does occur. So I'm pleased to say that we've not experienced any catastrophes at Mortal Falls in the last 12 months, but we have had our fair share of knockbacks. So before we finish by opening the floor to questions from all of you lovely folks, here's 3 of our recent knockbacks and how we responded. So the first is our Melba digital program. So Melba, for those of you that don't know, is an interactive creative intervention program designed to manage worries and anxiety with 7 to 11-year-olds. We had a live touring program before the pandemic and have created a fully digital program in the last year. Because we've never done anything like this before, we completely underestimated the time it would take to develop, to test, and then launch a digital program like Melba to a school audience. In addition, the school audience was largely unresponsive to it to begin with because of all of the pressures that they were facing themselves as a result of the pandemic. So we didn't hit our initial sales targets, which had a wider impact on our company finances. The project was much bigger than we anticipated, much more extensive, much more expensive, and resource intensive. And some of the things we wanted the programme to do still aren't quite in place. But as an organisation that really focuses on quality, it was really, really hard to launch Melba and versions of Melba that weren't quite finished and test them along the way, especially when we were getting a long list of feedback about things that weren't working or weren't quite landing well with the audience. And it was hard to feel like it was hard not to feel like we were failing. However, we've learned that this is an essential part of the process of developing and launching an innovative digital project. And been reminded not to forget what our target audience are going through, which is learning that we can now apply throughout all of our programs. The second thing that I wanted to share with everybody was letting our drive and ambition for a project to succeed override the reality of a project and the need to work with the right partner on it. We had a project that had been in development with a couple of partner organisations in Northumberland for a couple of years, and we'd spent a lot of time and energy and resource trying to make it happen, as we could see that it was going to have a huge benefit to young people and that there was an urgency of need there for it. And this led us to overlooking red flags that were there along the way and starting to compromise our needs in the project, until we reached a point when certain things came to light which conflicted with our values and the way that we wanted to work. And we realised that we had to walk away. So despite the wasted time and energy and the disappointment of what we'd wanted to happen not coming to fruition, it reminded us of how important our company values are and how they can operate even better in our decision making. We have renewed confidence in knowing when something is truly right for us at Mortal Falls and when it isn't. What is brilliant is that walking away from that development helped us to lift our eyes and look for other similar opportunities. And we've since connected with the right partners and have a very promising project ahead of us. And the final thing is misjudging the impact of the pandemic on human behaviour and needs. We've sometimes been guilty of forgetting the real human impact of the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, our performances sold out. Most of our project partners were highly engaged. It was quite predictable how young people would engage with activities. And in many ways, we were in our comfort zone. Things often felt good. Presently, it's hard not to see performances and events with 1/3 capacity after a ton of work marketing them, selling them, building relationships as failures. Our youth theatre sessions that previously felt good now feel much more challenging, leading us to think we must be doing it wrong or that session was a failure. But we realise that we've been walking into projects and spaces holding pre-pandemic assumptions about people and putting our definition of success on numbers and on vanity measures. There are now a whole host of additional reasons and barriers why someone might not buy a ticket, might not show up to something, might not engage with a project or behave in a space in a previously anticipated way. We've taken the opportunity to ask why, to listen, to learn. And once you start asking why and engaging with people to gather their insights, probing into what's going on, proactively observing behaviour and metrics, you start to realise how complicated people's lives are right now, the barriers that they're facing and what they need from us as an organisation. This has led to increased relationship building and advocacy, better understanding of people, and new projects designed in response to those needs. So none of this is easy, I will say that now, which is why I'm going to return to coming back to the tangible things. So take things that from today that stimulate thinking and take tangible things that you can put in practice and stick with a few to begin with. And that's the best way to embed the learning that you want to do and make some change. And then once those things are embedded, then add to them. So make it an iterative process. So that brings us to the end of today's scheduled content. So we'd now like to invite any of you that have got questions to do that now. And you can either pop them in the chat or you can stick your hand up, give us a wave, and we'll hear from anybody. No questions. I've broken everybody on a Monday morning. Fab. Okay. If nobody has any questions, of course, that's absolutely fine. So we'll pop all of the content that we've been through today in the notes that we'll send around, and we'll try and get those round in a timely fashion to anybody, but also we'll include our contact email addresses. So if there's anything that you want to follow up after the fact, that you've got those details, and our website is in there as well. And for those of you working in primary settings, shameless plug at the end, our Melba digital programme for Key Stage 2 is live and available now. And you can find out more details at melva, melva.org.uk. And picking up on what Alice said, there's a lot of things in there that are tools for actually use in the classroom that can be used across key stages, even though the programme is designed for Key Stage 2. All of the activities that you've got, all of the activities in there, you should be able to widely apply. Fab, I'm going to hand back to Mel just to close the session on behalf of Culture Bridge.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kiz and Scott. And thank you very much for a really interesting and thought-provoking session. It was a great start to our conference. And thank you to all of you for your honesty and bravery in your own participation as well, because that makes the session, doesn't it? So thank you. I'm just popping a link in the chat. This is our Imagine If page on our website, and that is where our recordings from our sessions will go. So over the next week or two, then you will find all of our Imagine If sessions on there. So if you want to watch any of it back in addition to using the notes from today, then please do have a look on there. We're running sessions all week, so if there's anything else that you fancy having a look at and booking onto, then again through that link, then you can find all of our other sessions, and please do join us later in the week, and hopefully we'll see you there. And I think Danny is going to pop a link to the feedback form in the chat. Oh, there it is. Very, very speedy and efficient. Thank you. And you will also have been sent an email with this in, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to fill that in at some point after the session, that would be perfect. And other than that, that's it from us. So thank you very much for attending this first Imagine If session, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.